I was saying, we are very lucky to be joined today by Dr. Pooja Tandon and Dr. Danette Glassy, authors of the new book, Digging into Nature, Outdoor Adventures for Happier and Healthier Kids, which was just recently published by the American Association of Pediatrics. All right, let's dig in. No pun intended. Okay, so if you learned about this webinar through Natural Start, you probably don't need to be convinced that nature is good for children's health, from social emotional development to academic success and physical well-being. But nevertheless, we also know that you're always making the case for it. So whether that's with families and programs or administrators who need convincing to add more nature into their programs, or maybe you're an advocate at the state level working on licensing changes to accommodate learning. There are so many ways that our community is making the case for outdoor play and learning every day. And having new evidence that from trusted sources is always beneficial and needed. There is a lot of research that supports the idea of nature play, particularly in early childhood, as being especially beneficial for children with special healthcare needs. So this includes research supporting green settings as associated with less severe attention deficits, or reduced impulsivity and inattention in children with ADHD, encouraging imagination and calmness in children with autism and helping them cope with change. The list goes on. And while the research here is clear and robust, as a field, we still have a lot more to learn about the how best we can engage with children with specialized needs so that we can offer opportunities for every child to have a happy and healthy childhood that's rich with nature, play, and learning. So we're really excited to see that the American Academy of Pediatrics is publishing this new resource because who is more knowledgeable and trusted on children's health than pediatricians? We are so thrilled to have the authors of Digging into Nature, Dr. Pooja Tandon and Dr. Danette Glassy, here to talk about this new resource today. Dr. Tandon is a general pediatrician and researcher at the Seattle Children's Hospital. She's an associate professor at the University of Washington School of Medicine and the director of health at the Trust for Public Land. She's published widely on the importance of physical activity, outdoor time, and nature contact for health. Dr. Glassy is a primary care pediatrician and child advocate. She's the co-founder and board president of the nonprofit Best Start Washington and leads Project Nature, which is Project Nature Initiative, which is a program to support pediatric medical professionals as they encourage children to spend time in nature. She's the co-editor of Caring for Our Children, which are national standards for health and safety in childcare settings. So with that being said, I will go ahead and stop screen sharing and pass it off to our guest speakers. Dr. Tandon and Dr. Glassy, please take it away.
All right, well, thank you so much, Sydney, for that warm welcome. Thank you for all of you for being here. I loved following along the chat to see what amazing representation we have from around the country and outside of the US as well. I saw a few of those. And I'm hungry with all of your references to Thanksgiving foods. So yeah, Danette and I are delighted to be here. And we hope to cover much of kind of what's in our book and what we've learned along the way, and leave time for your questions as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Danette to get us going.
Yes. Thank you so much, Sydney. Yeah, you covered a lot, and definitely want to emphasize how we couldn't agree more that early childhood is the time to get the most bang for our buck and all the great things we do for children's health and wellness. And we definitely are passionate about that. Today we're going to be talking to you a little bit about what is known about the medical evidence that supports getting children out in nature more, and a real thorough look at the barriers. As you know, if it were easy, we wouldn't have to have this webinar. And we're going to spend a little bit of extra time on children and caregivers with medical conditions and disabilities, and touch on culture and how that affects our families' access to nature, and wrap it up with a little bit of a call to action. Pooja and I were inspired to write this book because of our experiences. In my primary care practice, I was seeing fewer and fewer children spending time outside, more and more reasons that they couldn't or chose not to. And it was a little bit upsetting to me, and I didn't feel I had the tools to kind of help the families reprioritize that. Looking at the world's literature and whatnot about how important this was and how maybe we could successfully work on that. Pooja and I got together and created these tools for pediatricians. And as we were doing that, it became clear that we could share some of the things that we learned in that with families. And that's how our book came together, digging into nature, which we'll talk about a little bit more.
Yeah, and I'll just add that for me, my experiences as a pediatrician, as a researcher, I worked on some projects to do those systematic reviews of the literature and really sort of elevate the scientific evidence, the increasing scientific evidence around that. And then finally, as my personal experiences as a parent of two boys, and recognizing that my own childhood memories really influenced where my passion for this work and what I experienced as a parent. So we wanted to start us off with a little bit of interaction with all of you through chat, where we would love to hear about a childhood memory where you were doing something joyful outdoors. And if you could just drop in the chat and we'll maybe call out a few of them.
You guys had great childhoods. I'm going to put that away for us a little bit and advance here. Maybe I'm in a different, there we go. So definitely all of these memories, a lot of people share, and we definitely felt like there was more to remind families about how important that is. So Pooja's going to tell us a little bit about what her research team uncovered and what we know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think recognizing that, for so many of us, and I'm sure certainly in this group, having those childhood memories and those early experiences with others, with nature, played a role, I think, in our well-being and health and strategies around resilience, and how that is kind of we believe, underappreciated, underutilized, and with inequitable access for many children today. And we know that nature contact supports mental health and healthy behaviors and decreases harmful exposure. So those are kind of three large buckets of kind of the ways in which nature contact supports health and well-being. And we'll go through each of them. And as I mentioned earlier, some of this comes from a literature review that I worked on with a team, where we started when we kind of tried to search all the literature out there. We started with about 10,000 hits on a search and ended up with about 300 papers that we summarized and reviewed in more detail. And this was a few years ago. Since then, there's been even more and more evidence for children and really people of all ages, from prenatal times, and we talk about that a little bit, into our older years, for benefits to our health. So next slide, please. And we can talk a little bit about some of the different categories. Mental health is one that we are hearing a lot about right now, certainly in our clinical practice. More attention post-COVID, but this trend was we were heading in this direction as a society for even before there, where the majority of teenagers and young people today are reporting decreased levels of happiness and more stress than before. And this is one of the areas where the literature on nature contact is actually one of the strongest. That there are a lot of studies, there are rigorous studies and experiments that have found that time in nature living near nature, having, neighborhoods where there are trees and parks nearby are associated with things like decreased stress levels, increased reports of happiness, decreased symptoms of things like depression and anxiety, and also behavioral and learning related to ADHD. Just specific to that, I was involved in some work with in King County in the Seattle area around advocating for equitable recess. And as part of that work, we found studies that also supported that specifically school-based recess is associated with better behavior, both on the playground and then afterwards in terms of classroom management, and improved ability for students to concentrate and learn when they go back to the classroom. And then studies around ADHD, where children with ADHD, these are experiments where they might have them, walk on a noisy kind of urban street, and then in another scenario, walk through a forested area or a park and do certain executive function tasks. And being in nature, being in those nature-rich settings is associated with better executive functioning, things like concentration and recall. So many things I think that are probably of interest to educators as well, because it impacts classroom behavior and learning. And also evidence that time in nature is associated with what we consider pro-social characteristics, how children interact with each other, and the kinds of play that they engage in, more creative play, more supportive play. I'm sure many of you have seen these if you work with children in educational settings. And then kind of broader literature around interventions like for greening neighborhoods, when they turn vacant lots into parks or green areas or plant trees. Those things are associated with reduced property and violent crime, and those are sort of positive qualities that are conferred on a community in general through nature. Now, the physical activity piece, that is another, along with mental health, the second area of some of our strongest evidence on nature and health, and especially children's health, that being outdoors, being in parks is one of the most consistent correlates, most consistent supportive ways to get children to be more active, more physically active. And that is related to things like fundamental movement skills, physical literacy, the idea of building those skills that are important, not just for physical activity when you're little, especially if you're, kind of in the preschool years or under 5, but also the building blocks for both the skills and the fitness for lifelong physical activity and active living, but also the joy and the confidence that will be so critical for having these children engage in, whether it's sports or outdoor recreation, things that they can do lifelong. But a lot of those building blocks and skills are laid in those early years. And then movement is also associated with healthier weight status. And I'll put a caveat to that. In pediatrics and in medicine in general, there is increasing recognition of this idea of healthy at all weights, and that the benefits of moving your body and being physically active is independent of weight status. So while there is this concern about weight and health conditions associated with it, getting moving and becoming physical activity is important for people of every weight, and also associated with things like better sleep, which we know is so important for many health benefits. And one last thing I'll say is this idea of green exercise or green activity. More studies on that in adults, but this idea that running on a treadmill versus running on a trail or a path or a nature-rich area, you're getting maybe the same physical benefits as far as physical activity, but there are additional benefits to the restorative capacities that come from green exercise compared to other kind of indoor exercise. Next slide, please. And then the prenatal health. This is really just a fascinating area of research. One study that we mentioned in our book looked at over 70,000 pregnant people and across multiple countries in Europe, and there have been similar studies in other parts of the world where during pregnancy, living within closer proximity to green space was associated with less risk of preterm birth and healthier weight status and better pregnancy outcomes. So both for the parent and the baby. And so really just this idea that that our environments, our built environments, our access to nature are important, even before we were born, really, and lifelong. And then I love to point out this vision benefit, and recently our Society for Ophthalmologists also elevated this work, really compelling studies, many of them done in Asia, that when children spend time outdoors, even 20 to 40 minutes a day, that was associated with less myopia or nearsightedness, or if they already have myopia, less progression of needing glasses or contacts. And that may there are probably many reasons for that. When children are outdoors, they're spending less time on close range activities like screens, and there may be other mechanisms at play in terms of light or vitamin D or other theories. But really, this idea that spending time outdoors can also benefit our vision. And I think globally, they're estimating that by 2050, about half of the world's population will be nearsighted. So, that comes at significant cost in all senses of the word, and really an intervention or an idea of that's beneficial for so many reasons for children. And so add this one to that as well. Next slide. And then, studies like, in terms of when we talk about healthy behaviors, gardening interventions, so preschools or elementary schools that have put in community gardens or involve children through kind of gardening curriculums or activities, have found that those children are more willing to try fruits and vegetables, which certainly as pediatricians, we love any opportunity or any program that can get children exploring more of the vegetables and fruits as part of the healthy behaviors, and setting them again on that trajectory of healthy eating for life. And then the environment. And this is becoming particularly important as we think about the changes to kind of climate change, extreme weather events, all of what we've been hearing about more and more recently. But planting trees, protecting green space is important for air quality, reduce noise, and a lot of interesting literature in the last several years around the cooling effect. So even schoolyards, for example, that don't have a lot of trees or vegetation, a lot of asphalt, cement, plastic, can be sometimes 10 to 15 degrees hotter than surrounding areas that have more trees. And so that has a huge impact on the ability for children to play and move in those environments, to learn in those settings. So really another strong argument for increasing nature in schoolyards and in our communities. And finally, this is less connected to health in the moment, but studies that have found that time in nature helps grow pro-environmental attitudes. So children's interest in things like recycling or composting or decreasing motorized vehicle trips, and developing that connection to the natural world as future stewards, and a specific piece of that with there's been increasing concern of this idea of climate-related anxiety, that children as young as elementary school are worried about what's happening to our planet, to our earth, and engaging in environmental restoration, tree planting, removing invasive species, helping be part of the solution can be a powerful way to to alleviate some of that anxiety and help children and adults see themselves as part of the solution. And this slide, it covered many of these things already, but I'll touch on a few others. This is the how. So we talked about, what are the health benefits of time in nature? These are some of the ways in which the pathways by which we get there. And it probably is a maybe different or a combination depending on which health outcome we're looking at. Biophilia is this idea that as humans, we are part of this earth. We are connected innately to our environment, and therefore spending time in those settings is of course beneficial for our health. This idea that time in nature, especially awe-inspiring big nature, can be restorative from our kind of cognitive capacities of how much our brains can take. Stress reduction, cortisol, immune function, that the trees themselves emit substances called phytoncides. These are often talked about in the context of forest bathing, but that as when we inhale them as humans, it can improve our immunity or our immune cells. Certainly movement, physical, clean air, and then social capital, which is this idea that children, especially young children, are likely to be in nature with others. Many of you, recall those childhood experiences of being with parents and grandparents and siblings and friends, and in a time of a pandemic of loneliness, it's been called that having those opportunities to connect with loved ones, connect with strangers and neighbors. I mean, all of those are more possible in those public spaces that are, parks and nature in our communities. So yeah, next slide. And I think that maybe is the last slide.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
There we go.
Yeah, and then we'll move a little bit to kind of the developmental benefits more specifically. And Danette, I'll have you take over here.
Yes, and in fact, kind of explore the idea, I think, of time and nature together and what that developmentally, social emotional development, how that leads to better health and wellness, and certainly stronger mental health too. So, birth to age 5, we think about the developmental milestones of gross motor or big motor, fine motor, language, social emotional development. And certainly, nature is this creative and non curated, bumpy, exciting space where children can practice their developmental skills, and is much more enriching than your flat surface indoor spaces. So we definitely believe that getting children outside in a more natural setting promotes their gross motor skills, their fundamental movement skills, as Pooja was talking about, the fine motor skills in a creative way because of all the loose parts and interesting things, the twigs and the leaves and the rocks to pick up and manipulate and be inspired by, the social emotional skills. There's a lot of talk recently about free play. As pediatricians and parents and educators, we're all thinking about what we want these kids to be doing out there and to enrich their lives. But children actually also need a fair amount of free play time where they get to direct what they're doing and think about how they're going to interact with the space on their own, and even be a little bored sometimes and manage that boredom. It turns out that those skills that you're learning in directing your own play and managing your boredom are really important for subsequent mental health and your resilience down the line. Another one like that is risky play. And I love that in the opening, someone had talked about a mom who let them climb trees because not everybody's mom has, enough confidence to let that happen. But children do need to have some risky play in settings where they have to solve the problem, or they might get a little bumped or scraped but they learn from that. And again, it gives them that confidence that they can come through those kinds of challenges. And then finally, for the resilience of children as they're growing up, we really believe that this idea of relational health in pediatrics, we're definitely counting that as one of the developmental milestones. As parents or other caregivers become important in a child's life and share that awe and inspiring outdoor spaces, the creativity that comes from it and sparks between people, and then of course children as they're playing together and their social capital as they build together in the creativity of outdoor spaces. We also wanted to remind you that even though the traditional developmental milestones kind of stop at around 5 or 6, there is still this acquisition for children in ages 6 to 24, people are talking about, of acquisition of life skills. And we see nature as another opportunity to really grow that. Certainly encouraging your child to play outside so they can continue to do maybe some risky play, manage their free play, grow some social capital, be inspired in their creativity, all of those things as they grow older. But also in the other spaces where they're now spending more and more time, right? In their K-12 schools, in their extracurricular activities, and maybe it's just a summer camp where they finally get this real dose of nature that helps with the acquisition of life skills. That is so important, even beyond the original ones. So we can't tell you enough how much we feel growing outdoors really builds this resilience that we're kind of seeing an epidemic of children who don't have as much resilience and certainly could use that. Pooja, why don't you share this slide with everybody?
Yeah, this was a great sort of graphic I came across a few years ago, put out by the California Surgeon General as a kind of stress busters as a response to ACEs, adverse childhood events, and they looked through the literature and compiled these 7 strategies for supporting resilience and for against ACEs, and this was right on the tail of the pandemic as well. And I was excited to see that access to nature was one of them, along with many of the things that we've discussed that are also facilitated by nature, such as physical activity, mindfulness practices, quality sleep, supportive. I mean, really everything in here, connects to that what we've talked about. So just an example of sort of, and there have been also similar frameworks. We didn't want to inundate too many, but also at the kind of federal level of just increasing recognition of the importance of a thriving natural environment to helping children and all of us thrive.
Exactly.
Well, maybe we'll switch a little bit here as far as, now thinking about the challenges and barriers that you may have encountered if you're an educator or anybody in your family or friend group. Like, what are some of the common challenges that you think come up for children or families to spend more time in nature? And go ahead and drop those into the chat, and we'll try to pick up on some of those here and address them in the next part of our talk.
So gear, wheelchair accessible, balance issues for the caregiver, the older adults maybe taking children out. Maybe this idea that there's, admin pushing a certain number of minutes needed for reading and math. That's the straw that broke the camel's back was actually a kindergartner who came into my office and said, when I asked her what she liked to do outside, she said, "Oh, Dr. Glassy, I'm not an outdoor girl." And her parents were extolling how she was already writing computer code, and so this idea that children need all of this math and science and reading only. They do need that, but yeah, poison ivy. So the safety in spaces, overscheduled, too many extracurricular activities, and no time for free play. I think you guys hit most of them. Let's go on to our next slide. Pooja, you can walk us through some of these.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this, I want a transcript of this chat because I think that they're really hitting on all of the things that we've come across. I'm wondering if, yeah, I mean, the things that we hear most about as pediatricians are often things like weather, lack of access, and then that kind of overscheduling screens, like where the time that families have, and then being able to support children with disabilities or special healthcare needs, or as was pointed out, some of the family members, it may limit the child being able to go out there. So I think in the next slide, maybe we talk a little bit about some of the potential solutions or strategies.
That's the children with special healthcare needs. Yeah, maybe we can just chat about it here. And even in the chat, people are throwing great resources. So it would be good to have a transcript of the chat. People are sharing really great things. um, uh, so there's this idea of Parks prescriptions that if only doctors would just tell families that they need to go outside, they would go outside. And I think you all know clearly in your chat, you're recognizing that's not what the issue is. The issue is all these other competing things that come down for families. So in our work, when we're working with pediatricians and families about nature, in our book, we tried to pull together all of those resources. So definitely the idea of greening your schoolyards and trying to make the time that children have out away from home as well as at home more green. So that takes a lot of creativity and certainly money and communities coming together, especially when you're talking about childcare or preschools that don't have the resources that even the K-12 schools have. There's the competing and the idea of overscheduling. I think we all just need to support parents. The Surgeon General's latest missive on mental health in the United States was about how stressed out parents are. They're doing the best they can. They're trying to make sure that children have their child has everything they need, which includes sometimes all these other activities, but we also need to, as trusted advisors, to let parents know that that needs to be limited. It can't be at the expense of these other things like free play and sleep and family time together. In Washington State, we have this drizzly rain for several months, and it's not even that cold, but people complain about it. And mostly it's the parents and caregivers who are complaining about it. But finding ways to be able to get gear, especially for little tiny kids who are growing so fast. You buy that pair of boots and 2 weeks later it doesn't fit anymore. That can be very expensive for families to have the snowsuit and the gloves and the hats and keep buying them over and over. So looking to gear libraries, to free marketplaces like online Free Cycle and Facebook Marketplace, looking for ways that you can have your gear swaps, maybe through your school or another community center, so you can get gear to families. The screens are compelling, and that's a whole separate talk. I'm sure you guys will have had or can arrange for, but empowering all of us to just say no to the screens or limiting them and their scope, or turning them into a way to bridge, especially for older kids, a way to access um, uh, time in nature, uh, and safety. And in our book, we wanted to cover not only the idea of physical safety. So your local park, is it staffed? Is it activated? Are there groups? Dr. Tandon tells a story about her family, or her a patient who really wanted to practice basketball, but it wasn't quite safe at the park where he could go do that. So he looked up when the old people were playing pickleball there, and he knew he'd be okay because the pickleball courts were right next to the basketball court. So this idea of activating your park space. Um, there's also the idea of the safety from wildlife, where we practice. Some of our families live in an area where a lot of bears come down in the summer, and having to think about that. Certainly also weather safety. So is the air quality okay today? And remembering to check that. Um, anyway, for every barrier and for every family and community, there are slightly different answers and bridges, but starting to think as a trusted advisor, how am I going to bridge these barriers and challenges for families is important given our what we have in our community. Let's see. So the idea of children with special healthcare needs, we knew there were a lot of nature books on the market, but we wanted to kind of do a deeper dive. So our book, we have a lot more information about children with special healthcare needs. And many children have some sort of chronic health condition or disability. And sometimes it's just even temporary. Think about the summer you spent with your arm in a cast, were you still able to access your nature like you wanted to? So the numbers can even skew higher. And then thinking about the caregivers, grandma who can't walk very far, or mom who has an autoimmune disorder and can't be in public, things like that. So it's really important to think about bridging these challenges with this in mind as well. And so some overriding ideas that we think are important to pass on from our pediatrician friends who take care of these families. Your accommodations should always make nature more accessible, but also inclusive. And so, yes, you might have that park that has the wheelchair accessibility right up to the edge of the playground, but can the child in the wheelchair or the grandma in the wheelchair get onto the playground? It's got to be inclusive and in a way that children can interact together. So this idea of inclusivity has to go beyond accessible. And then for whatever disability you're talking about or condition, you have to think about safety. You have to think about the fun. It can't be just boring and dull. There's a great playground over here for fully abled families and children, but over here we've got something that's a little more boring. It can't be that. And of course, can include ways to include the friends, the school, and the whole community. I would also tell you to always think about partnering with a particular child with their particular disability and health condition, partner with their healthcare provider so that you really understand what the care plan is going to be in this natural setting. It sounds exhausting to think about contacting the doctor's office, but we did it all day long in the office. We were writing care plans for these kids and being real specific about what they can and cannot do in a natural setting. So don't forget to reach out and find out. And I also want to throw out a little pearl to you. Sometimes when children are first diagnosed with things, parents are so protective and so immersed in the idea of managing this new medical condition or healthcare problem that they really narrow their child's scope down to really in ways that they don't need to perhaps, or after a while everybody gets to know how to manage this particular condition and they really could be open to more experiences, but the parents haven't gone to that next step. And so by partnering with the child's healthcare provider, even the parents may learn that, yes, this child with cancer actually can play with other kids outside. Their immune system is maybe a little bit weaker right now, but outside is okay because germs spread, respiratory germs particularly spread less easily outside. So again, sometimes always parents are the final word, but sometimes parents are ready to move a little bit farther when they hear from the healthcare providers that the child can do more. And the explosion of community groups and parks and nature centers that are thinking of children and families with healthcare needs and disabilities is off the chart. As we started writing the book and I started to look around, I didn't know even half of the ones in my own community. So it was very good to go online and learn about these groups that really can help children move into nature more easily. So there's definite groups that we covered in our book. Certainly the children with mobility challenges, either unsteady on their feet or needing crutches or wheelchairs, thinking about what you need to think about in getting children in natural settings. Children with lung and heart issues sometimes have to have a little bit of curated nature or a little bit of change to how they're experiencing natural settings. I had a patient who was going to be the next Major League Baseball star. When he found out he had inherited his family's condition where his heart could stop if he was too active, and the whole family was pretty crushed. But the cardiologist was so wise and suggested to them that they all start fishing as their outdoor activity, and the whole family took it up like crazy. So here was still nature time and being outside, but in a way that was safe for this particular family. Diabetics have to think about their expenditure of calories and their input, and now even their equipment. If you're wearing an insulin pump and your continuous glucose monitor, they have to talk to each other through an internet connection. And if you get too far out, will you have that in nature? A lot of things to think about with diabetes, but no reason to not be out there, again, in conjunction with the people who take care of the child. We know now about children with seizures and other neurologic conditions, certainly children with autism and on the autism spectrum disorder, having spaces and making natural spaces more welcoming to them, and certainly using that nature time to sometimes help calm the anxiety that comes along with that. And of course, thinking about for children who have cognitive deficits and their ability to manage the space that they're in, and just providing those supports while they're outside. Cancer, I mentioned, and Dr. Tandon talked about depression and anxiety and managing those symptoms, certainly. Would you add anything else, Pooja, to this list here?
No, I think we
Yeah, and definitely have more in the book. So we really are trying to inspire everyone that park equity is related to health equity, because we need all kids to be able to equitably and immersively use that park space. And it definitely requires the community to come together and fosters a sense of community. And another way to do that is to think about our schoolyards, libraries, maybe the green space around a library, cemeteries we were talking about during the month of October, and ways that we can access more green space.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the time and I want to make sure we leave time for
yes.
questions. So we can maybe not do this as a whole activity, but we did want to point out, and through our book, we have tried to sprinkle in some different cultural considerations and how kind of your own upbringing and your family's culture certainly influences your ideas and activities and what you feel comfortable doing. And I think for those of you and those of us that work with families from different backgrounds and cultures, to sort of be aware of that, as I'm sure you are. And one thing that helped me, and I reflect on this a little bit as somebody who grew up partially in India and then moved here, and our family just didn't we didn't camp and hike and do a lot of the typical what we think about in Western culture as outdoor activities, but connecting with nature allies and mentors, that others who might be able to support someone or a family in trying an activity that they may not otherwise feel comfortable doing. And because we believe that, the joy and awe of nature really just makes parenting easier. And this may be something that, again, those of you who work with children, maybe in outdoor settings, have this power to convey that joy and confidence to families so that their child's experiences in nature continue in the times that they're not with you as educators.
So I guess in kind of wrapping up, we definitely want to support you in your inspiration of trying to get families out in nature. And because of the physical, mental, cognitive well-being, but also for your own well-being as well when you're out there with kids and growing your relationships. And we know it takes partnerships for the whole community to really make sure that kids get over these barriers and challenges and get out into nature. So we'll wrap it up and take some questions now.
Thank you, Danette and Pooja. Oh my gosh, such an inspiring presentation. Again, I think we all know that nature is very beneficial for our young children, and especially for children with special health needs. But again, that how and when and where's where I think there's still a lot of questions. So I think your book is a really great resource to start educators and administrators on figuring that part out. One question that's come up. So as we know that nature is beneficial for children with special health care needs, there's probably some pushback from parents of these children who understandably might have concerns about safety. And so wondering about if you all have had any experience with that, and if so, how you might recommend working with the parents and their concerns to assure that their child or their children are getting opportunities to engage in these nature settings and experiences. So.
Yeah, I sort of touched on that because I saw that in my own practice that, parents became very overprotective, especially in the new diagnosis, and respecting that anxiety that they have about their child and the things that they have. One of the things I would do is to kind of talk through what are you worried about if we do this picnic, or whatever activity you're thinking of or what you're thinking of with their child that they're maybe pushing back on, and get them to articulate what it is that they're actually worried about. And then if need be, ask them to perhaps talk to the health professional who's taking care of that particular child for that particular need, because maybe they have a workaround for that, or they can reassure the family, like the cardiologist, who this family was just devastated. They thought they'd never get outside again or be able to do anything. And the cardiologist was real quick to give them something new to think about. So I think that careful listening, asking the questions, what are you worried about and what have you tried, and kind of exploring those. And then should we ask the pediatrician or the cardiologist to weigh in on this, or the diabetic educator about what we can do when we're off the grid, and now we have to maybe go back to the old-fashioned way of managing diabetes. For everything, I think respectfully exploring the issues is what's going to get you through on that.
Thank you. Another question in the chat. Animals are such a major part of life and of course nature. They also bring many of the fears and perceived dangers that limit outdoor experiences. What is your wisdom about animal encounters, from the wild ones to chickens to dogs and cats?
Yeah, that's such a good point. And one place where that we heard about that a little bit is in more rural communities where, one might, maybe those of us that live in urban areas might have this impression that those children have kind of so much access to nature. But one of the, concerns that we've heard from our colleagues and families is animals, stray animals, wild animals, and that could be a challenge to getting outdoors. So, sometimes those types of concerns about safety, and then also just, you're a family, again, personal family cultural experiences around safety. I mean, one strategy around that is, going to places that are less wild, if you will. Like we got that suggestion of, going to camps or programs, or in national parks, like ranger led tours. So really leaning on professionals, or camps that are on farms. So more kind of programs, or where there may be those with expertise that can help sort of offer that level of safety and guidance in places with animals. Danette, I don't know if you would add anything else
You
around
know,
that.
just wearing my Caring for Our Children National Health and Safety Standards hat for childcare, there are some compelling creatures that carry disease as well. So playing with lizards and in a chicken, yard, or all of that, always remembering to wash your hands with soap and water and sing the alphabet song and all of that after you're done with those natural encounters as well, because especially younger kids, if they get salmonella or shigella or some of those diseases that the natural animals, especially in the wild, can carry, it can be deadly. So you have to be kind of thinking about that as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And just one more question. I know there's a lot that we didn't get to get into today, but one last question before we wrap things up. Someone earlier on asked about how is more beautiful nature defined, and this was in the context of research on nature impact. So maybe if there's research on the amount of quality nature, and yeah, anything on that.
I mean, the only thing I've seen around that is awe, is this idea that, there's an entire book on it, or this idea that that more immersive experiences in nature can kind of elicit this response of awe, or having this kind of smaller place in the universe, and that there may be that creates sort of a different response in our body as far as more beautiful nature. I don't know, Danette, if you have other thoughts.
I just lean on what you've taught me about that there is no set amount of nature that is the right recipe, or the kind of nature that nature everywhere is also is beneficial, and part of it is that sense of awe, or I would also say being mindful to it. A ladybug lands on you. Let's say you're on an urban street even, but a ladybug lands on you, and taking the moment to look and feel and appreciate and share with the people around you what just happened, that is awe, even in a gritty setting. So I think that's why it's hard for the researchers to really quantify this for us, because really finding nature and the awe of nature everywhere is also your goal.
Thank you. Excellent answer. Nature and the beauty of it is everywhere. You can find it anywhere. Just have to keep your eyes open. Thank you so
And
much.
and ears and nose and all
All
your
the senses.
senses.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. Okay, everybody, let me just go ahead and screen share one last time to say thank you to our wonderful speakers for joining us today and sharing on this new fantastic resource. I have my copy, everybody. Be sure to go get yours. If you'd like a copy, we'll share the link in the chat where you can find different platforms where you can buy it. And I will quickly turn it back to Pooja and Danette to share one final quick thought or point they'd like to leave you all with. Danette, would you like to start?
Sure. I would just like to build on that idea of community, that as you go about your day and your life and the people you're meeting, sharing these ideas with everyone because we all can use a little nature and it's all around us.
And I'll jump in with something that I think we didn't get to talk too much about, but this idea of green time. We've been talking more about that as when we think about screen time and being inundated with it as a strategy that people of all ages, and if we can sort of go towards the societal norm of, when is our green time, and building more green time into our lives.
Excellent. Thank you, Pooja. Thank you, Danette. As I said in the beginning, both this webinar recording and relevant resources, including those listed in the chat, will be made available over the next week on our website. We'll be sure to send you all an email as registrants to notify you when those materials are posted. Do not fret. Quick plug, if you would like to continue learning with Natural Start, don't forget that access to the 2024 annual conference online is available until next summer, and there are more than 50 on-demand sessions available. You can keep your eyes out also for the call for proposals for next year's conference. That'll be coming out in the next month, and it's your opportunity to join the conversation by sharing your expertise. So stay tuned. Lastly, if you are not already a member, oh no, why is this not showing? Well, this is just a quick slide talking about our Natural Start Alliance membership. It's free and quick and easy to join. You just have to visit our website to submit your information as an individual or an organization or program. And then you'll gain access to a plethora of benefits like being added to our program map and sharing and receiving professional development resources. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you all so much. We'll email everyone to let you know when the recording and resource lists are available. Thank you again so much for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day and week. Goodbye, everyone.